Love is Like Pulling Teeth is the 13th episode of the second season of Wings, and I don't really like this episode. I don't hate it, but I didn't really find it very funny. I can't remember how I felt the first time I watched it, but interestingly, I did remember it. With rewatching Wings, it's been about 3 or 4 years since I watched it the first time. With rewatching it, there are some episodes I remember quite well, and there are some that I have no recollection of. This one was very memorable, but I don't remember if I liked it. But this time around, I didn't really care for it. I didn't find it to be very entertaining, but it wasn't exactly bad. So I will go through the episode and discuss what happens, but in general, I don't have that much to say, to be perfectly honest, but there will be spoilers from now. We start off with a very brief intro with a conversation between Faye and Roy about his cholesterol, and that's basically the beginning. And then we have part of the main narrative established, where Joe and Brian are planning on having a bunch of people over. They're going to be watching this big college basketball game. I don't care about basketball. It does not interest me. But nevertheless, they're excited about this. Their plans seem to be going really well. Then Joe calls Helen into his office, and they have a lovely little romantic kiss. It's very nice. Joe and Helen are, of course, newly together. And Joe points out that Helen kind of forgot to pick him up after she said he would. A little bit awkward. And then Helen, rather untimely, tells Joe that she needs somebody to pick her up from the dentist because she's not going to be able to drive herself home. And Joe obviously agrees to do this, but then he realizes that it's the same day and the same time as this college basketball game. But because he gave Helen this big speech about how you're supposed to remember to pick somebody up if you're in a relationship, he kind of had to pick her up. He couldn't back out of it. And I think they were trying to get a lot of comedy out of Helen having her mouth all stuffed up and she can't talk properly. And I think that's meant to be funny, but I didn't find it very entertaining. I didn't really care about any of that. So that didn't really appeal to me. And then Joe very sweetly reads her some magazine articles. She falls asleep. And then Joe decides to sneak out of the house to watch the game. Then he goes to check on her, and then he watches the game again, and it goes back and forth. And I found this to be very repetitive and just kind of monotonous. And then he goes back, she's missing, and it turns out she'd wandered outside. She'd actually ended up at a neighbour's porch, I believe, so she was safe. But I feel like they could have kept that suspense going a little bit longer, maybe let Joe's guilt play out a bit longer. It just felt very rushed, and then the ending just fell flat, where Helen thanked him the next day for being there for her and looking out for her. It was a sweet thing to do. End of episode, and it just wasn't good. I really didn't enjoy this one very much at all. It might not be a bad episode as such, but I also think Love is Like Pulling Teeth is just kind of dull. It didn't really entertain me at all.